And then on the 22nd of June was when I shot down this Betty bomber.
How'd you find it?
Well, I'll tell you. We were on, the four of us in our division, we were on what was called the alert. And on alert, you taxied out to the end of the runway, warmed up your engine, turned it off, and left your radio on. And then the tower, if you were needed, would call you to scramble. And sure enough, we hadn't got it turned off good till the tower says, when our designation that day was Drake 5. I'll never forget, Drake 5, scramble. Give delegate a call on channel 2. Oh boy, that sounded like exciting to me. So we're off in 30 seconds, we're airborne. Delegate was the control ship for the entire operation. It was out in the bay. And so John Montang called him and said, Delegate, Drake 5 airborne, 4 chicks. And they came right back and said, this is Delegate, give Pineapple a call on channel 9, Angels 8, I believe he said. Well, Pineapple was the radar station at the very northern tip of the island, which was about 50, 60 miles away. So we bore out for, and as we got close to the northern tip, well, he called in, you know, Pineapple, Drake 5, airborne, 4 chicks. And I never forget the guy saying, oh, Drake 5, says, I think we have something for you. He said, Vector 000, Angels 10. We hadn't gone 10 minutes. And I had eyes like a hawk then. And way above us now, I see all these black specks. And I shouted out, you know, tally ho, tally ho. Bandits at 12 o'clock high. And we start climbing right, you know, the worst thing that happened to you is to be below them. But we were about 3,000 feet below. Well, anyway, these guys weren't very good or they'd have killed us all. There were, as I remember, there were 6, I counted 6 fighter types and this one bomber. And funny looking bomber, it looked like it was pregnant. And it's like George and I took out after the bomber, Montang and Rister went after the fighters, the 2 of them. Their odds weren't too good, but these guys weren't very good anyway. Well, anyhow, the bomber turned off to the right, kind of headed toward the China coast. And George and I started after him. Now, he went into a shallow dive, and that was a fast airplane. That was the best bomber they had. And he was carrying a Baka, B-A-K-E, which was a flying torpedo. And there was a man in it. And as soon as we began to close on him, he dropped that guy. And it just sailed off into the East China Sea. Poor devil never knew what hit him. But anyhow, we began to close on the Betty, and by this time we're all the way, it took us a while to catch him. We're down low to the water, 100 feet, 200 feet, and going full bore. And well, so what I was trying to do, George was went over to the right side on the starboard, and I stayed on the port on the left. We were trying to get ahead of him. We had him bracketed to where we could make a run, you know. And I made a terrible mistake. I failed to drop my belly tank, which would have given me an extra 15 or 20 knots. But I was excited. I didn't do it. So we finally got up almost even with him, and I saw George coming across, like making a turn into the left and making what I thought was a run. And as he pulled in down this, he went down, and I could see his guns were firing, but there was nothing ahead of him. I didn't know what he was firing at. Well, he'd been hit. This tail gunner, they had 220 millimeters in the tail, and he obviously hit him, because I never saw him again. He just went into the water. So when that happened, I'm still trying to gain on him, and this gunner turned around on me, and I thought I was plenty far out. He put a 20 millimeter right behind the seat. right through the plane. Bing! And I was, of course, you know, I was frightened, but it didn't explode. I guess it was an armor-piercing load or something. But when that happened, I decided I better take some action. So I just turned toward him and started firing when I got in the range. And pieces began to fly off. That poor devil in the tail never had a chance. I got him in a hurry. I went past him. The plane came back in behind, and I was sitting on his tail firing these 650 calibers, hard as I could fire, and wondering why he didn't blow up. And suddenly his left engine started leaking oil and covered me. You know, my canopy was blurred, but I wasn't hurt any. And I just kept firing, kept firing. We were right down on the water, and he blew up right ahead of me. And I flew through that flew through that explosion, the fire. Singed the left wing of the plane. Thank God it didn't hit that belly tank, or I'd have blown sky high. Anyway, he went in the water, and I went back up to altitude, called Pineapple, told him what had happened, and started calling for George, but we never heard from him. Looked for him that day and the next day. Never found a thing.
Apparently the Japanese gunner was really good.
He was good. He was good. Well, anyhow, so that was, we got indoctrinated rather quickly once we got there. And we flew.
Did the other two men have any trouble?
No. They shot down 2 of those fighters, and they didn't have any trouble. Like I said, they weren't very good at this point in time. They used up all their good pilots. This bomber pilot was good, but these fighter pilots, the equipment they had, some of it was inferior. But anyway, George and Paul stayed together, did the job, and came back without a scratch.
That's a tough way to lose a friend all of a sudden.
When you've been with him as long as I had, all through training, through the ferry deal, the closest friend I had.
Did you ever write back to his parents?
I went to see him after the war, yeah. Of course, they were distraught, and I tried to tell them the best I could what happened. I never really knew, you know, he never called, he never got on the radio, he did. It was apparent to me, you know, thinking back on it, he just took a terrible hit. That was it.
He wasn't married at the time, was he?
No.
He was from
Oak Park, Illinois.
Oak Park, Illinois. Okay.
Well, anyway, Okinawa continued. We finally went across. I flew. June was it? July was. That was it. June. The rest of June, I flew, and